everybody, and welcome to this edition of our Big Time Boxing Show. And on this show, I have a very special guest. We've been kind of featuring some of the men who do such a great job center ring as ring announcer. We had Mark Chinook on and Jimmy Lennon Jr., and we're going to have Michael Buffer on in the near future. And on this show, we're going to feature the gentleman who is the ring announcer for the Big Time Boxing USA series that I do on DAZN, promoted by Salita Promotions. And of course, he does all the fights for Queensberry Boxing, Frank Warren's company. And of course, on a recent episode, you saw the interview I did with Frank Warren, which was delightful. And now we get a chance to visit with Thomas Treiber, who I've known for a long time and have watched his career as it has mushroomed. So let me welcome into the fray my good friend, Tom Treiber. Tom, how are you?
I am fantastic, Al. Thank you so much for having me.
This is great. I was looking forward to this because you and I have known each other for a long time, and I've been kind of privileged to know you way back at the beginning when you were beginning your journey mostly as a ring announcer in boxing, although you had done work in wrestling and a lot of other things as well. But when you started really in earnest doing the boxing, I had a chance to interact with you during that time. And your journey in boxing, like so many others who do what you do, has been a series of progressions, hasn't it? With different entities, different platforms, and different companies. At what point early on in all this did you know this was going to be something that was going to be your main thing and was going to click to the point where, okay, this is my occupation, this is what I'm going to do, and I know I can make a go of this?
Well, great question. In 1991 was when I did my first ever ring announcing job. It was in Hammond, Indiana. I was still a senior in high school. I was only 17 years old. Had no idea what I was doing, but I had this unique opportunity to do that. I was lucky to be friends with a boxer who went to the same school as I did. And it was just an idea that came about that because I was interested in broadcasting, I thought, why not try ring announcing? Just an opportunity to get some experience behind a microphone. So fast forward about 4 years, and in 1995, I got my first opportunity to work on ESPN. And that first event was actually on ESPN The Deuce. And if anyone would know about ESPN and ESPN The Deuce, that would be you, Al. So
yeah.
It was, my first taste of being on live national television. And after doing about a handful of those events, sorry, my light went off on me here. After doing about a handful of those events, I ended up having this, opportunity to start working with Top Rank, which was, a big step up from where I had started. And that's where I first got to work with you on ESPN shows.
Yeah.
And it was at that point that I started to really realize, like, wow, I mean, this could be a career. Like, this is something that could turn into a, regular job for me. So I would say it was about the mid 90s and about 4 to 5 years into ring announcing that I finally started to feel like, okay, I'm going to really, really pursue this.
Now, one of the interesting things to me about ring announcing is ring announcers need to find their own identity within the confines of what they have to do. They have a very specific function. That function is the most important part. And you have to get it right. You have to make sure it's done correctly. But each ring announcer wants to do it in a certain way that gives them a distinction, but doesn't overpower the message of what they're doing. How did you, in your mind, arrive at that? And how is that an ongoing process with you?
Well, when I first started doing it, of course, the ring announcers that I would watch closely to try and see how the decisions were read and how they worked in front of the camera was, of course, Michael Buffer and Jimmy Lennon Jr. Those were the first two ring announcers that I really, really paid close attention to in boxing. But at the same time, I knew I wanted to have my own style. You never want to sound like you're impersonating anyone.
Right.
So I definitely knew even early on into my career not to go in there and try and sound like I was impersonating anyone. I want to have my own style. Even though you're doing the same job, you want to do it differently.
Right.
So um, it was really, something that over time, as you hone your trade, as you become more comfortable, you kind of find yourself. It's certainly not something that happens overnight. And that's why I always tell other aspiring ring announcers to do as many shows as you can,
Yeah.
do as much as you can behind a microphone. I took every gig I can get, even outside ring announcing, just to get experience. I mean, I emceed a beauty pageant one time. I emceed a bodybuilding competition. I did everything I could to just get experience, because as a ring announcer, there are going to be things that are thrown at you that you need to be a little bit off the cuff, and you need to be
Yeah.
able to speak comfortably in front of a camera, not just rattling off the fighter statistics or announcing a decision.
And the other part of that, which I'm going to jump forward a little bit here, but is that now ring announcers are frequently called upon to be MCs. Jimmy Lennon Jr. and Michael Buffer, and now yourself as well. You have found yourself in many instances, as you have recently in doing the Queensbury fights, especially the ones that have been happening now in Saudi Arabia, big events where you are called upon to be a host. So
Yeah.
that's not exactly the same role as announcing fights. You're doing something similar to it, but not the same thing. So you need to be facile enough, right, to be not just somebody that's reading from a card and giving facts.
That's a perfect example of doing something that's not so ring
Yeah.
announcer-esque, if you will. And you're still introducing people, but it's a different type of format. And certainly with these Riyadh season events, it's a full week of festivities. On Tuesday, I host the grand arrivals. Wednesday, I host the media workouts. Thursday, it's the press conference I'll open for, weigh-in, and then the show on Saturday. So it's a full week of doing many different types of things, and feel very honored to do that and be part of those great productions.
That comes about because of your role with Queensbury Boxing, and I alluded to that when I introduced you about the fact that you do all the shows for them, and we had Frank Warren on here talking about his association now with the Zone, and talking about his past history, which I've known Frank for over 30 some years, and been watched him and actively worked with his company as well.
Yep.
That opportunity for you, it seems to me, has been a central piece of your success as a ring announcer.
Absolutely. It was 7.5 years ago that I got my first opportunity to work for Frank Warren's Queensberry Promotions, and it was in London, England. And it was just one show that now has turned into almost 8 years. And what an incredible company to work for. Frank Warren, a great man, a very classy man, a great promoter,
Yeah,
Hall of Fame
I
promoter,
agree.
Hall of Famer like yourself, Al. And, I just can't say enough great things about that. And that relationship of working for Queensbury certainly opened that door for me, as the relationship with the events in Saudi Arabia, came along. So right place, right time. And a lot of times in this business, that is the case.
Over the course of these years of doing this, what are some of the moments that jump out at you being there in the middle of excitement? Because the one great thing about being a ring announcer is that you are literally at the central focus of these fights when they are starting, which is one of the most dramatic times really for these big boxing matches, because of the anticipation of people. What are a couple of the things that you're going to remember when you look back at this 20 years from now?
Well, it certainly is a great feeling to be right there in the center of a ring when there's so much excitement and all the fans are excited. And, be working in the UK, and Al, as you know, I know you've worked
Yeah.
extensively in the UK. The fight fans in the UK are really
Oh,
phenomenal.
off the charts.
And, when we did recently Daniel Dubois versus Anthony Joshua at
Yeah,
Wembley
that was big.
Stadium, we had over 90,000 fans. And the hair is standing on my arms right now. I mean, it was really a pinch me moment of my career. because I used to ring announce in front of, 50 people on small independent wrestling shows for very little money. So to be doing what I love and get to perform in such in front of such a large live audience and the millions watching at home, truly an honor. And it's just a great feeling to be right there and be a part of the excitement.
Now you mentioned the fact that you watched two of the great ring announcers, Jimmy Lennon Jr. and Michael Buffer, both of whom I've known, and of course I've worked with both of them. I worked with Michael Buffer for 10 years on the ESPN series, and I've worked with Jimmy at Showtime for almost 20 years
Wow.
during his tenure. But if Jimmy Lennon Jr. were here right now, Thomas Treiber, what message do you think he would have for us?
Well, Al, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to a great night of boxing action as we welcome AlBernstein, Hall of Famer, and Thomas Treiber. Well, I've worked with Jimmy many times, and
I love that. I love your Lennon impression.
That's my Jimmy impersonation.
No, I love your Jimmy Lennon impersonation, and it's done with lovingly, so with great affection. He was when he was on the show here recently with me. He made a very good point, of what he says to ring announcers that are aspiring. You talked about talking to them. He said, don't be so worried about a catchphrase or a something. Worry about, if you find that and it's part of your vocabulary, that's fine, but worry about doing your craft right, and the rest will take care of itself.
I think that's great advice, and it's so true. I mean, paying attention to detail is so important. Announcing the names correctly, because in boxing, you're working with boxers from all over the world. And, you've got judges from all over the world. You've got so many names that you need to say. So I do my very best to actually speak with each person to get the correct pronunciation of their names. I'll talk with every fighter, make sure I've got their nicknames properly, make sure I'm announcing them from the correct hometown, because people move around and so forth. So paying attention to those details is much more important than trying to come up with some, line, if you will.
Yeah, I agree with that. And sometimes when you're in the ring as a ring announcer, you have to deliver news to fans that they don't like hearing, a decision that everybody in the arena or many people are distressed with, or a disqualification or whatever. Do you ever feel when you're up there, sometimes you can feel the vibes, and even though you're just the messenger, you're still feeling that kind of intensity from people?
Oh, absolutely. I've announced decisions and stepped out of the ring and had people yelling at me, that was wrong, that was a wrong decision. Like, hey, don't kill the messenger, But I think sometimes when I get that decision, I see, boy, wow, because I'm usually the first one to see the decision. I'm thinking to myself, wait till the people hear this decision.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to be in that position sometimes. But, I like to see good decisions. I like to see fighters get a good scorecard. You never want to see a fighter get robbed or anything like that. But there's been a few times I've been handed that scorecard, Al, and I've been like, oh, my goodness.
Yeah, this one's going to be a doozy. Now, you and I, you actually once did play-by-play on a broadcast with me. Am I correct about this?
That is correct. I had the honor of working with you a few times.
Let me tell the world right now, you were exceptionally good. I told you that at the time, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
And you did a wonderful job. Did you enjoy that?
I really did. It was a unique situation. There was a promoter based out of Michigan who had done a deal with Fox Sports in Michigan, and the ring announcer was already set. They had Jimmy Lennon Jr.
That's right.
But they needed a play-by-play announcer. And he called me and said, hey, look, I've got an opportunity for you. I was still living in the Chicago area at the time. So I was able to drive in and do the event. And it was a great opportunity and an honor to work with you, of all people, to be doing play-by-play. So you made my job easy, Al. That must be said. But I appreciate the kind words, and I really enjoyed it.
It was a lot of fun, and you even survived working with me. That was, you know,
I spent a little time in a mental hospital after that, but I made it through.
you had to get some treatment after that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no question about that. So as we look forward in boxing overall now, one of the things that struck me the other day as I was looking at things is just the sheer volume of boxing that is now all of a sudden in the last 8 or 9 months really become crystallized. The sheer volume of boxing done by the different promoters, several different platforms, both internationally and domestically. The thing about boxing is there's a lot of it right now, isn't there?
There is, and that's great. I think
Yeah,
the more events there are, it's more opportunity. Whether you're a fighter, a
sure.
trainer, a
Yeah.
matchmaker, a promoter, or announcers like us.
Hmm.
So the more boxing, the better.
And
And
better for the
it's
fans too.
absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just glad to be working steadily. We know how this business can be at times. You talked about earlier how this career can be a roller coaster. There's been good years, there's
Yeah.
been bad years, but I never quit. I never wanted to quit. Once it was in my blood, I just never could get away from it. And I just feel very fortunate to be working steadily and being part of some bigger shows these days.
And the series that we collaborate on together, the Big Time USA, Big Time Boxing USA series, which is a series designed for the most part for fighters on the cusp of, though we have champions on there. Just did although you couldn't be there, we just did the Subriel Matias title eliminator fight where he fought Gabe Valenzuela. And that series is a fun one because we get to see fighters in their sometimes in their embryonic stages or just on the cusp of contention, and it's a chance to kind of introduce them to people.
That's one of the reasons I love Big Time Boxing USA is the young fighters, the perhaps future world champions that we've been able to see and start to blossom over this series. And it reminds me a lot of Showbox that was on the
Yes.
Showtime network. It was a great platform for young up and coming fighters. I mean, there are countless world champions. I remember Gordon Hall, the executive producer, telling me one day how many fighters there were that actually became world champions from that series. It was just unbelievable. So, Big Time Boxing USA is kind of setting that same platform, but they are doing some bigger fights as well. So it's a nice blend of both.
It
And
is.
Salita and Dimitri Salita does a great job putting together these shows.
He does, and our last show was a perfect example of that. We had young fighters, we had contenders, we had a title eliminator. It was a great potpourri of boxing, and a lot of it exciting with so many storylines and all the rest. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you on that series. I look forward to seeing your work with Queensberry. Here's the interesting thing. You are soon going to be somebody that will eclipse me uh, in the mileage department with airlines. You know, your mileage account is going to go beyond where I got to because of all these trips to Saudi Arabia, I think. And believe me,
Oh,
it's no small feat to eclipse me.
well, that'll be quite an honor because I never thought that would be
We'll have a
possible. But
ceremony.
well, it's I've certainly spent a lot of hours in the sky and
Yeah.
racking up the miles. That's for sure.
Well, and you've added so much to those events, uh, both in the ring and doing all the events that you talked about leading up to uh, the, uh, the fight. And one of the things I love about your work, and it shines through when you're doing things like the fighter arrivals and the press conferences and weigh-ins and things of that nature, is that you are so conscious of doing your job appropriately, uh, doing it with enough pizzazz that people are aware you're there, but not trying to overtake the actual event or take the spotlight away from the people that are supposed to get the spotlight.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think a lot of that stems from early in my career. As you mentioned, I've worked in professional wrestling. And I was told by an old time pro wrestler one time, he said, remember, it's your job to make us look like stars tonight.
Yeah,
It's not about you. And I've always kept that mentality. I never want to make it about me. That's why I've always liked the classic tuxedo type look. I've never wanted to wear anything too flashy. Hey, and if
yeah,
that's your thing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I've
right.
always tried to take, that classic look to the ring, and also, keep in mind that it's my job to make these fighters look like stars.
Well, you do that very well, Tom. And
Well,
uh,
thank you.
the boxing world is a better place because you're a part of it. And I
Wow.
look forward to continuing to see your career blossom. And I continue to work with you.
Well, Al, I appreciate those kind words. They're mutual. I thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. We go many years back, even to when I spent a little time in Vegas, and
Yeah.
I was just this aspiring ring announcer. But let me tell everybody watching that Al took the time to speak with me. You even brought me on your remote radio show to
Yeah.
speak with me. I will never forget that. And that would have been almost 30 years ago. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's amazing. You know, I was talking to somebody in the entertainment world about this very thing about uh, the idea that you want to pay it forward. I was talking to one of the top entertainers here in Las Vegas who works a lot with who's very instrumental in young performers going forward, and is a person that really gives them a lot of advice when they want it, and encouragement and even help. And he used the term "pay it forward" to me when he was doing it, and I believe that's the way to do it. You know, you when you can be helpful, or somebody that you know is talented and you know should move ahead in their chosen field. I think it's part of the process that you should be helpful, and ultimately, I really believe that comes back to you in some good way in the future.
I agree 100%. And that's why I'm always opening the door to give any advice that I
Yeah.
can through my experiences behind a microphone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, thank you very much for joining me here. We'll have you back again, and maybe we'll talk about some specific boxing stuff and some matches, so people can get your expertise, because you are a big boxing fan, and
Absolutely.
while you don't go on this side of it to do the commentary thing very often, you know about the sport. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Tom Treiber, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I sure did. A young man who is the future of ring announcing in boxing, and has already made a very special place for his talents, both with the Big Time Boxing USA series I'm on, and certainly with Queensberry Promotions, where he has done a great job across the pond and in the United States, and now internationally as well. Well, we'll see you next time on the Big Time, our Big Time Boxing Show. Take care, everybody.